Welcome to Document Film Festival. My name is Mo Hume, and I'm a professor of Latin American politics at the University of Glasgow. It's a real pleasure to be here to speak to Carolina Corral, who's the director of a very powerful film, To See You Again, which follows the story of three women, two mothers and a sister of disappeared people in Mexico, in their journey to seek for justice for their relatives. The film is very powerful, and it's an absolute honor to be able to speak to Carolina and find out more about this. So I would like to introduce Carolina Corral, who's the director of the film. Carolina has a PhD in visual anthropology from the University of Manchester, and began, I guess, her visual anthropology journey through her doctoral thesis, which looked at women in prisons in Mexico. So very welcome, Carolina, and thank you for making such an important film, which both raises awareness and really challenges us to think about justice processes and the role of the state in fostering impunity and fostering violence in Mexico. I found the film a really hard film to watch, and I think that's a good thing. It needs to be a hard film. This is a deeply uncomfortable subject, and I just kind of wanted to ask you about around just some of the motivations for making the film. Obviously, it's a really important issue, but maybe you could talk to us in your words about how you decided to make this film and a bit about that journey.
Yes, thank you very much to you, Mo, and to Document Film Festival. I live very close to the site where this all happened, so more than choosing the subject chose me. It's not the first time I touch upon the topic of disappearance. I got involved in the movement for peace with justice in 2011. It was like the first big movement that rose against the so-called war on drugs, which was an excuse to militarize the country. So that was the first time that we marched against the war on drugs, and the first time that the families of the people disappeared and murdered spoke out. So at the beginning, there was this misunderstanding of thinking that all the people murdered and missing were involved in something, like meaning drug dealing and all these like narrative of being involved in drug gangs and drug cartels, and it's already like 200,000 people murder and 70,000 people disappear. So it's like obviously not everyone is involved with that. So it was the first time people spoke out saying like, my son was not involved in anything, my daughter was not involved in anything. So it became clear, it became public and clear that the war on drugs was about something else, about murdering a lot of poor people. So I began to be familiar with that narrative and telling these stories, interviewing families that had lost someone or had someone disappeared. So by the time the exhumations happened, the mass grave was discovered nearby, I was really in shock, like knowing they were unearthing people near where I lived, and that we all carried on with our regular normal lives, everyday life. So I went to document that. At the beginning, I thought I was gonna just do a very short film because I belong to a collective that reported on those topics. But then when I arrived to the site and I started meeting the mothers who discovered the mass grave and opened it, I realized there was a whole film to do there. So I stayed there, I met them, and I started telling the story through them. That's how I got close to it.
Thank you. And the film follows multiple stories, but the kind of three key stories are Lina, Angy and Edith, two mothers and a sister of disappeared two women and a man. How did you get to meet these three incredible women, incredibly courageous women? And do you still have a relationship with them?
Yeah, I met them at the site. Them, I had met other mothers during the movement, but them, I met them at the exhumation site. Edith had just joined the movement. She was very shy. She didn't know she was going to find her brother at the mass site. So it was a surprise even for her. I saw her transformation. She became a very powerful woman. She still organizes and supports her 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 friends even after she found her brother. So that's why I approached them. I found so much power on them that I decided to follow them three. They belong to the same collective of search, and that's where I approached them. We are still very close because they have been a very close part of the film touring as well. They have, I mean, wherever we could show the film in person, they joined and they came along, or virtually as well. Like in this pandemic year, we've shown the film virtually quite a lot. And yes, we're in touch, and we're in touch with their demands as well, which whatever they're asking to the government, we try to help them push that. And yeah, it's very important to walk along with them.
Yeah, I'll come back to the demands in a second, but I guess I'm really curious because what really struck me watching the film was how these women from different backgrounds had become forensic experts and were accompanying this very embodied process of accompanying this mass exhumation. One of the pieces that really struck me from the film was when they said, "You don't smell here, you taste it." And they were trying to encourage the diputada, the member of parliament, to get involved so that, you know, that she could feel this very embodied experience that they were feeling. Could you tell us a wee bit about how they've organized? You know, you mentioned collectives. Do they organize with NGOs or other organizations? And how this journey of becoming forensic experts happened, because it's such a powerful journey and such a necessary, given the absolute lack of accountability of the Mexican state and their involvement that becomes more and more apparent as the film goes on, in both through inaction and in explicit actions in these mass graves.
Yeah, you're right. They organize through different collectives of search. There are around 4 collectives in Morelos, where I live. And they meet in marches. They meet at the government offices. Like Lina and Angy have a very it's very touching the way they met, because Angy says that she met Lina while she went to put the first complaint against, and like so that the authorities search for her daughter. And that's like, she saw her there fragile for the first time, asking for her daughter, receiving a negative from the government, because there's all of these stereotypes of like, oh, your daughter must have run out with her boyfriend, just wait for her for a few more days. And then Angy approached Lina and like hugged her and gave her confidence, and that's how they start meeting and forming collectives. They all think that being together is more powerful. Shouting out on their own doesn't do anything. So they start making families amongst them. That's how they get together and push their demands.
I think that's one of the things that comes across really powerfully in the film, the solidarity among them and the strength that each woman gives the other. You know, one of them says to the other one of the evenings, and they're obviously exhausted. They've spent all day in these inhumane conditions. Then, you know, tu puedes, you know, one day more, you can do it. And that kind of the importance of that kind of solidarity among families that I've seen in other cases like this comes across very powerfully in the film. And that's obviously hard to sustain over time as well, you know. And you said that Edith, despite having found her brother, is still very much involved in these processes. Perhaps you could kind of tell us what are the key demands of the families, and you know, how, you know, this process has been going on for many years now. Have they managed to kind of find any kind of open doors in the Mexican state, for example, or internationally?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so from the time they opened the mass graves, they have returned 12 bodies have returned to their families, so they have been identified. However, right now the identification, the DNA tests are like they have stopped there, because this moves along with the press. If we're on the news, if the topic's on the news, then things move. But then if they're not, it froze. So right now they haven't finished identifying all the bodies. So we say like, it doesn't do anything if you exhume all the bodies and you put them somewhere else, you're not identifying them, so it's the same. So what the mothers are trying to do now is to push the identification of the bodies, to finish all the DNA processes made by the authorities, so that they can make the match up with the families, and so we can know who they are and they can return to the families. So one very important point is to finish the identification of all of these bodies, and the second is to finish with the exhumation of the mass grave from Jojutla, because it's not finished. There's more bodies waiting to be unburied at Jojutla. So also to carry on with the exhumation as well is another petition.
Okay, so the identification and the exhumation, and I noticed that on the website for the film, you have you know, as part of making the film, you've developed a database as well, and an impact kind of, you know, plan or an impact campaign, if you like, that accompanies the film. Do you want to tell us a wee bit more about that, or indeed how people might get involved, say, watching this from Scotland?
Yes, so we thought about this new concept of developing an impact campaign to the film, which is basically making activism along the film. And for that, there is Magali Rochar, Lina involved as producers, impact campaign producers. And yeah, with the database of so basically all the drawings and the notes that the mothers made about the bodies are the only documentation that we have from the bodies, because the government hasn't given any results. So all these careful drawings and all these careful notes that they have, we process them into a database, making emphasis of the clothes that people were wearing, or the tattoos that they were wearing, on any like important data that they could be identified from. So we made little postcards with those data, being careful of not exposing anything that should not be exposed, like the file number, for example. So you can find these postcards in our website, for example, in our Facebook, which is Volverte a ver/doc. And the idea is to start spreading the word on the bodies that were buried there, in case a family member can recognize a piece of clothes, or a stamp, or a tattoo. Because we couldn't wait any longer to spread this word out. We cannot wait for the government to give results after 4 years of exhumation. So that's one of the part of our impact campaign, to spread the word. Another important part is to make screenings not only at cinema festivals, but to organize screenings with local authorities and federal authorities and universities, and to spread the word out of the cinema circuits. Those are kind of
I find the notes, and particularly because the film closes highlighting elements of the woman's very detailed notes, or their forensic notes of the exhumation. I found that extremely powerful as as an advocacy tool, but visually very, very powerful as well in terms of concluding the film. How have reactions been to screenings in Mexico among the different audiences that you've just mentioned?
it is, as you say, a hard film to watch. It's very, yeah, it brings people a reality we don't always want to see. So it's very interesting how it is different from for audiences that have not been touched so closely by the disappearance issue, and it's different for families. For the general public is hard, and it's a sad film, and it's very interesting that for families who have lost someone or who have someone missing, it's an inspiring film. We showed them for the first time at the there were families of people disappeared camping at the main square in Mexico City. They had been on strike there for a few weeks, and that was one of the first screenings of the films to show them to the families. Lina, the protagonist, was she presented the film, and it was very interesting to have as a response them saying it's such an inspiring film from families that came from other states, because they said like this is what we need to do in all the states. We need to open the mass graves, we need to ask about the common graves to our governments and ask them who did they bury, who are they, and to see if they are disappeared people in common mass graves. So for them it was a powerful and inspiring film to see what the mothers of Morelos had done. So it's a different perception from the general audience to the families.
And have you had any responses, say, from people who work within the Mexican state?
Yes, they were. It's hard for me to speak about the government because I feel it's a lot of simulacrum that they just speak but they don't do a lot. They were about to organize the reopening of the mass grave in December and then in January now, and the pandemic is the best excuse to stop the works, so it gives them a very good excuse. But they are very close to open them also because there's a local authority which is very interested. He's an independent authority, and he made it to the government, so he's pushing a lot for the reopening of the mass graves. So them, and then the documentary, and then other powerful, like for example forensic anthropologists, we're a whole team of people, and of course the families pushing on that issue. So hopefully we will achieve the reopening of the mass graves. That's what we're pushing for.
One of the things that I found very powerful in the film, one of the many things, was how the women, A, were so incredibly articulate of their demands, but B, how they really challenged the way that officials hide behind bureaucracy and protocols. What one of the family members said, we're vaccinated against this, protocol type language. And I thought that came out very, very strongly. But that also kind of demands women have, the women in the film are educated against how the state works and these different kind of protocols, which I guess I found very, very powerful in terms of, how they had built this knowledge, over time and out of absolute necessity. But another issue that I kind of liked in the film was how you kind of juxtaposed this absolutely kind of horrific scenes of exhumation against these very everyday kind of coexistence of the woman in the hotel space, but also the kitchen spaces where they're kind of cooking or preparing notes. And that takes an awful lot of trust to be able to make a film with that level of depth. As a filmmaker, and I guess as an anthropologist, how did you find that process of building trust to be able to come up, to be able to kind of develop a film which has so many layers and so much richness to it?
Yeah, I first filmed all the scenes on the mass graves as I was getting to know the mothers. So I was actually filming without knowing exactly who was going to be a protagonist. I was just following them, having an instinct, guessing who it was going to be. And then because we needed to film the process, that was going to take 2 weeks of exhumations, and it was over. and then after that, it was the time when I started approaching them, and it's a lot about being clear to the people and letting them know what do you want to do, letting them know you don't want to do a quick reportage, like journalistic work on that, but that you want to go further. It's about explaining them that it's going to be some days of filming, that it's going to imply going into their homes and filming and talking. So it was, yeah, a relationship developed over 1 year. I think there's some scenes that we filmed a year after the exhumation, like all the scenes in their homes and all of this. By that time, we had already built a close relationship to them, and like being close by going into marches and by being in important events to them. So yeah, I think that is a process to always be close to people and be honest and share spaces beyond beyond filming and beyond the actual topic, being present in important days for them, and talking a lot and being honest, giving as well as receiving. It's about giving. So yeah, a year after when we filmed the scenes in their homes, we had already like built a relationship and explained to them a lot of what we wanted to do. So yeah, I think until now we have a nice, loving, close relationship to them as well.
And I guess it's quite different kind of for you moving from, you know, academic study and visual anthropology to making a documentary film that isn't maybe confined with the same rules or regulations that academic study might be. Do you find that there's an overlap, or particularly around the kind of ethical dimensions of filmmaking? You know, is there an overlap, or are there, you know, is one a freer space than another, or do you have any reflections on the kind of different spaces?
Yeah, I definitely find more freedom in visual storytelling. That's why I do it. I think I take from anthropology all the teachings of and all the love it has of knowing other people and spending time with other people and getting to know other people's stories and listening to them and paying attention to small stories. I think I grab all of that from anthropology, but definitely not the writing and the way you can express. That's where I find anthropology has a lot of limitations, because you have to write in a certain way. And I felt doing my dissertation, my written dissertation, I felt I was caged. And in filmmaking, I feel a lot of more freedom of like not being afraid of putting yourself in your in your piece. So I feel in filmmaking you can openly be yourself and you can openly state something political. So and then visually, of course, what all the visual and audiovisual can express, it can touch on a lot of more of broad issues that written anthropology cannot express. So I definitely love the visual because of that. But I do appreciate all of what anthropology brings into it, because with all of the anthropological background, you can bring more than a reportage. You can go beyond a journalist account and get into a more anthropological look by listening to people differently than a quick journalist account. So yeah, they are mixed and they're mashed up.
And I think that richness of both really comes across by having those intimate or everyday moments, if you like, alongside the more kind of, you know, more, and I'm going to use the word shocking, but this is part of their everyday. Their everyday might shock us, but it's part of their everyday being accompanying these justice processes. And I think the film really, by juxtaposing them, does really create that sense of this is reality for these women. This is not exceptional for so many people. You know, you mentioned 70,000 people have been disappeared in Mexico. So this is the daily reality for 70,000 families, which is, I think, so powerfully portrayed in the film. And the message from the woman that, this is a double disappearance, that the crime itself, but also then the action and inaction of the state in terms of reinforcing the difficulties for the families. Just to begin kind of finishing off, as I said at the beginning, that this is a hard and a necessarily hard film to watch, but I imagine it was also a very hard film to make. Could you reflect on the challenges of making this type of political film, a necessary political film, for the team who made it?
Yeah, the first stage of filming the exhumations, especially on the first mass grave, was quite easy access in terms of that the topic had already become public and it was on the news for a few weeks. So the government couldn't just pretend couldn't push the press away. So we had like a lot of access to the site and filming. So access in that respect was easy. Then politically, we haven't had a lot of harass. I guess as documentarists, it's easier than being a journalist who are like pushing upon the topics. We were not very public while making the film until it got released. And then we had a couple of calls, like menacing calls, but we're not even sure it concerns us or is directly to us or it touches upon the film. So I guess as documentaries in Mexico, I could say you're a little bit more protected than the journalists. The journalists have a very hard time. It's one of the countries, the most dangerous countries to be a journalist, but somehow being a documentarist, because you take more time making the narrative, because you're an artist or something, it kind of protects you weirdly, to say. And then, yeah, filming the second part with the moms, the more intimate one, it was indeed difficult because it was touching. It's always hard to go back to their stories and to make them tell them one more time. So that was difficult for them and for us. It was like a very moving shooting. But in the end, we were all grateful to go through that. Like, even they liked the film, they liked to see it, but they did say it was a hard shooting to do, like to go back to remembering their stories once more. That's always hard for them.
Yeah, and I guess telling those stories becomes a political act,
Yeah.
Part of their strategy of resistance as well. And that's something they alluded to towards the end of the film.
We went through it in a more deep way, not in. I guess journalists approach them very quickly, and they get from them very quick stories of who they lost and who are they looking for, and who are they, and they have like this speech already like automatized the families, and we made very much more in-depth interviews. So yeah, that goes really deep into what happened and into their family members, and that's painful, but that's also helpful. Like to go deep into the stories and to pay attention to that and to ask about who they lost, and so it's
the film, as you say, has a very political purpose, and to many, in many ways, it's a call for action. For many people in a Scottish audience watching this film, and I know I can speak for myself, when I finished the film, I wanted to find out more. And, I went onto the film's website and I looked at your database, and I guess I would just kind of make sure that that's out there so that other people who are interested can access the film's website, can look at the resources that are there and see some of the actions that you would suggest. Is there anything, just to kind of finish off, that you would say to an international audience about how to keep up to date with what is happening in Mexico, or indeed how to get involved in a kind of solidarity with these families.
Yes, thanks. I guess, yeah, as you say, following our social networks, you can have an update of what's going on. And I think it's always very helpful when international audiences joined and help the collectives, because yeah, international pressure kind of works best in Mexico. So there are, for example, some universities that have joined in screenings, or their forensic teams can also join if you belong to a forensic team, or if or of even anthropology science, or any science that can like help with pushing even the identification of the bodies or the demands of the families by making them public, by giving them name through your university. All of that is very useful for the mothers. For them, it is very meaningful that the film it's out there being screened in the UK. So yeah, any voice that can be given from the UK, it's important for them, spreading the word and all of this.
Thank you so much, Carolina, and thank you for making such an incredibly powerful film and a story that we absolutely need to hear. You can see the film To See You Again at the Document Human Rights 18th Film Festival, which runs from Monday the 25th to the Sunday the 31st of January. You can watch the film To See You Again throughout the festival week, either by getting a single ticket or with your festival pass. And the full programme and information is available on the Document website, which is documentfilmfestival.org. And I would very much encourage you to watch this extremely brilliant and powerful film. Thank you so much, Carolina.
Thank you to you on the festival, to Document Human Rights Festival. It's very meaningful to give voice to the mothers in the UK.
Thanks.